one of the key issues in the online volunteering for individuals was that they wouldn't have the relationships that they perceived you can have when you go overseas to volunteer, so depersonalized relationships. Also, a lack of support or interaction from the organization that they might be working with. But supportingly, we see that a lot of people felt there wouldn't be any challenges, both for the organization and for themselves. So that was very promising. Also, for the Global South partners, one of their key issues that they felt would be a problem for them with online volunteering would be the costs associated with it, and also the lack of technical equipment and internet. Then we see the language barrier would be perceived because we would be working with lots of different nationalities and groups, as opposed to what we currently see in overseas, where the language is primarily English, and the lack of know-how with tech and internet. And again, very similar to the Global South, the Global North partners felt that a lack of technical equipment and internet could be an issue. But also they see that lack of clear goals and objectives could also cause issues for online volunteering. So there are a lot more findings in the report, but essentially what we did find through our work was that there is a lot of support for online volunteering, and people do believe that it is a good idea for humanitarian aid. As one participant said, it is good for inclusion and sharing experiences, expertise and knowledge between the South and the North. In fact, it is one of the best ideas, but as we know, it is limited in many ways. So now I'm going to hand you over to Shane Halpin, the CEO of Viatores Christi, who commissioned this report, and he will talk about some of the key takeaways from the report. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sharon. Yeah, I suppose for me, the key thing about this research is that while it has been around for a while, online volunteering, or virtual volunteering, call it what you will, is the poor relation to face-to-face engagement, and as such has never really been given a chance up until now. With COVID, we have all been catapulted into the technical age to a degree which we probably would never have anticipated, and at a speed that we would never have anticipated. So now it raises issues and challenges, but also huge opportunity. Almost all the partners engaged in this research, like ourselves, the sending organization, had never really thought too much about it, given the obvious technical issues around internet and broadband speed. However, it is my firm belief that these have been a cover, as has been mentioned in the report. It's not a technology issue as much as an availability issue for those mentioned in the report. And for those for those in developing countries than those in the Northern Hemisphere. So the issue for me is affordability and desire as much as anything else. Do we really have a desire to do this? Why do we need to spend fortunes and burn unnecessary fossil fuel to send a volunteer on a placement that can be done in many cases as well by remote operation? Yes, volunteers who travel get to experience and to grow, and that is an important aspect. I, for one, experienced more in the first month of working with the poor in South Africa than I did in my previous 28 years. But that apart, technology and programs properly structured and properly resourced with clearly defined outcomes and targets can, in my opinion, open the doors not just to people who can't travel due to perhaps a disability or some challenge, but to individuals who can help build capacity from their home, or indeed with corporate buy-in, operating on corporate social responsibilities, engaging companies right across Europe. We need donors to get behind the possibilities of online programs. And while not limiting ourselves to face-to-face volunteering, perhaps we could reserve this area for people who are prepared for a longer-term commitment. I suppose we need to step out of the box and see online volunteering not as something necessarily that an individual does on his or her own 3 or 4 times a week from their home office in Ireland or wherever. But to extend our organization boundaries to encompass struggling NGOs and community organizations with expertise on many different levels offered on a remote basis. There will be challenges. There will be pilots needed to get this to work, both from the project design, but also from the perspective of donor engagement. But to my mind, the future is bright in this area. And perhaps for once, the COVID dividend might work in favor of the under-resourced South, and where localization might be something really tangible rather than just another development buzzword. So with all that said, we note that online volunteering can be an important aspect of humanitarian aid. So I'm going to pass it now to Abraham. Abraham is in Ethiopia, and he's working in humanitarian aid, and he is a person with a disability. So Abraham, if you'd like to take over.
Thank you, Shane. Yeah, as Sharron earlier said, and also Shane mentioned, online volunteering is one of the best ideas, and it does add value to many important areas, but we'll see today on 2 key areas: the localization agenda and disability inclusive development. We will see how online volunteering can really add value on these 2 things. First, let's see how online volunteering adds value to the localization agenda. The localization agenda is a transformational process to recognize, respect, and invest in local and national humanitarian and leadership capacities to better meet the needs of crisis-affected communities. As you can see here, localization agenda has 7 aspects in practical terms or in practice, but today for our purpose we'll focus only on 3 of these practices that are relevant to online volunteering. Online volunteering revolutionizes participation. It enhances visibility of local actors, and also it provides actors in the global north opportunities to engage more in capacity building. How does it?
Sorry, Abraham, can I just ask that people mute?
Okay.
Who is that? Can I please remind people to ensure that they're muted? Thank you. Okay, Abraham, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. So, online volunteering first enables local actors to influence action locally and also make decisions that are relevant for the local community, for the local crisis-affected community. And it also supports decentralizing of power and resources. Obviously, it does this by the capacity building supports provided probably from you guys. And online volunteering helps international actors also to step in only if and when necessary. So online volunteering provides immense potential also for large number of volunteers to support humanitarian aid. As I mentioned earlier, it provides for capacity building support to local communities. It drives best practices from the north and from other places also to local communities. It provides opportunity for doing advocacy works, and it also links voices and actions to the national and global stage. Online volunteering has also the unique opportunity to innovate the localization agenda by engaging capacity and perspectives of people from global south who have resettled in the global north to influence how humanitarian aid is designed and delivered in a context they understand, while supported from context they also understand. So this is one key area where online volunteering can provide or can add value. The second area where we can see value to online volunteering is disability inclusive development. Disability inclusive development seeks to include people with disability in the humanitarian aid process by recognizing their potential, valuing and respecting their contributions and perspectives, honoring their dignity and effectively responding to their needs. Here also, online volunteering creates a groundswell of new volunteers with unique perspectives. One participant from the survey said, by having access to online volunteers, we will see more persons with disabilities, older people, etc., involved in humanitarian aid. This is obviously so because online volunteering removes lots of barriers that otherwise prevent these people from engaging in this sector. So, in addition to this, online volunteering also provides an opportunity to challenge the discourse that disabled people are passive recipients of care rather than active contributors to society. From persons with disabilities side also, because it removes barriers, online volunteering provides greater opportunities for them to achieve self-realization. Yeah, one participant regarding this, one participant in the survey said regarding this, if persons with disabilities are volunteering, programs will be different. So how so? Yeah, online volunteering fosters more equal representation in the humanitarian aid, brings further solidarity among the recipients and aid providers groups. It also changes the way programming is designed and delivered. So we see that online volunteering is an important feature in humanitarian aid. We have seen that it adds value to at least two of the key agendas that we mentioned earlier, localization agenda and disability inclusive development. But it's not without challenge. Khaled Rooney, an expert in volunteer management, will discuss some opportunities and challenges highlighted in the research. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Abraham.
Thank you, Abraham.
So I just wanted to, I suppose, not dwell so much on the challenges. I think challenges have been very clearly outlined in this research and what Abraham has highlighted here and from the earlier graphs. But as you will see, that there are some perceived challenges, I suppose, which have to be addressed and which we have to be cognizant of and address those. And Shane also mentioned that funding has to be there. We have to have buy-in from our funders. We have to have buy-in from our partners and from the stakeholders who are involved in any type of online volunteering program. We have to have clear goals. We have to work a little bit differently to build relationships. You know, it's a little bit different when you have an online engagement as opposed to sending somebody on a plane to go and live at grassroots level in a community. So we have to look at that. Relationship building is very important in the type of volunteering and development work that Viatores Christi, like other agencies, engages in. And I suppose the way that we have to look at that is to think of it differently. So rather than look at the challenges, I feel that this is an opportunity for us to think differently. From my own perspective, as somebody who is used to the traditional type of volunteering, that's recruiting, training, and deploying, that type of model. You know, how do you manage an online volunteer? Well, I think we have to stop thinking in those terms. It's very, at the moment, what we are doing here and what we are, because we've been put in this position since the start of the global pandemic back in March, we're thinking of online volunteering in much the same way as we're thinking of digital volunteering. And that is recruiting the person, putting through a training program, getting them to know, involving the partner in the recruitment, and then putting that person on a plane and sending them to the partner country. So if we look at online volunteering from that context, it's not going to work because you don't have the same elements involved. We need to look at the relationships. How are we going to build relationships in an online platform? At the same time, I see, you know, in the type of volunteering that we have been involved in, I see very little diversity in those who do go on assignment. Generally, they are from, you know, educated to a high level from you know, a certain type of socioeconomic background, and there's very little inclusion of people with disabilities or from other ethnic groups in Ireland or elsewhere. So online volunteering should allow us to address that as well. However, if we turn this around and stop thinking of online volunteering, as I said, in the perspective of how we did things, physical deployment, a volunteer recruited and going off in the plane. But how do we think differently? We move away from that context. We're all here today from different parts of the world. I'm just amazed at how many people from different countries are able to join us here today. So we're all here on an online platform. And would this be happening if we didn't have a global pandemic ongoing? I think not. I think we'd probably be in a hotel somewhere in Dublin city centre with nice lunch and everything. But it would mean that a lot of you here wouldn't have been able to join in this conference. So we're all forced into, as Shane said, this virtual engagement online. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. Once we've all got online, and that's another challenge, we have the hardware, the software, the training, and the assistive technology. We're all equal on here. You know, we're all the same here. So we can use that as a starting point. For us to become equal on an online platform, we need to invest in technology, training, assistive technology, and we need to go back to the funders on that and put a good argument there. Instead of sending a person, a volunteer, to do a set range of tasks as a volunteer going on a physical assignment, why not look at how online volunteering can be used in different ways? We ourselves in Viatores Christi would have, you know, been sending up to 40 volunteers each year, each of them going on an assignment for up to a year, in some cases more, as part of a funded project. That came to an end when we repatriated a lot of our volunteers, like many agencies, in March. So in their place, we have recruited local volunteers, people who are already engaged in the project, people with the local knowledge, the language, the know-how, everything that they need to make the project work. And we have engaged with those individuals. We've invited them into our training program, which is also online. And we are setting up mentoring and hopefully building a network for all of those people to come together and share resources and knowledge. That's just one example of how online engagement can work. So instead of thinking of how we can get somebody to sit down at a computer and do 8 hours a day of volunteer work, let's think differently. Training can be done online, one-to-one mentoring. You can build relationships, we found that as well. myself and my Vivid colleagues, we've only met once in person at the beginning of the year, and largely since lockdown began in most countries, we've been online. But I feel that we've come to rely on each other, and we have built good relationships. Likewise with our partners overseas. So if we can just move away from what we know as the traditional form of modeling, or a traditional model of volunteering, we can expand and bring in new ideas and new ways of engagement. But again, it has to be supported. So just to summarize, there are many opportunities that we can move away from. We can just think differently. We can look at skills transfers, building networks, communities of practice, build in-country networks as well, and we can offer support and mentoring. So instead of thinking of a volunteer assignment as actually having physical tasks to do, why not build a network of people, organize one-to-one sessions, training, open it up, bring different people in from outside of your project, build networks, share resources. It's the way that we can build capacity. If you have a group of people in an online room, and one person has successfully achieved, has had a successful funding application, and then they can share how they did that with other people in the same position who are looking to get that funding as well. So we have to look at the opportunities here rather than the challenges, and I think that we can. So with the right funding, with the buy-in from the partners, and also awareness at grassroots level over time, we can make this work, I feel. It's all about leaving our traditional models behind. And this is not to say that once things, we enter this post-COVID world, that there won't be a need for physical volunteering. I think there will be. I think certain skills will always be in demand. Certain countries will need particular skill sets, particularly high-level medical, capacity building, specialist skills. They will always be in demand. But for now and for the future, and also as we see localization evolving, we need to look at our partners and how we can best support and come together on an online platform, and also look at inclusion. People with persons with disabilities, people from different backgrounds, how we can include them, people with really good skills and knowledge to share as well, and also engaging with people with disabilities who would traditionally be the beneficiaries of any humanitarian aid interventions, that we bring them to the table, that we get to an opportunity where we get to a stage where we're looking around our online boardroom table, and there's representation there. There's representation there from different ethnic minorities, persons with disabilities. Everybody's included. Everybody has a voice in the type of programs that they design. And program design is key, I feel. So this research does definitely indicate compelling potential for online volunteering in the way that I've shared my thoughts as somebody who's been involved in traditional volunteering. It can strengthen the European Union's capacity to provide needs-based humanitarian responses, as well as provide avenues for inclusive humanitarian aid. I'm going to hand you back to Sharron now, who will outline some recommendations to make sure that we can progress things further. Thank you.
Thank you, Colette. So there were many recommendations that we made at the end of the report, but some of the key ones that I'd like to just mention here now are that, like any type of humanitarian aid, particularly from the localization context, the needs for the online volunteering, programming, support, whatever is provided, should be coming from the Global South, and we should be listening to the voices and the advice of the Global South when we are developing online volunteering processes, procedures, and choosing how we work in an online volunteering process. Also, we need highly committed champions. We know the donors will be working with us. They will need champions in their teams, but we also, in our VSAs, in our volunteer sending agencies, in our international non-governmental organizations, and even in the Global South with the partners, we will need highly committed champions to progress an online volunteering program. When we do have online volunteering, and when we hope to see it piloted or going forward, where it is part of humanitarian aid, where we hope it will be part of humanitarian aid responses, we will always need to see that it has clearly defined objectives. Like any programming, it will need clear and regular communications with whoever's participating in those programs. So we need to work with the volunteers and the organizations they're aligned with. And again, like any humanitarian response, we need to have indicators. We need to have results-based monitoring and learning processes. And they may not be the exact same as we're doing now in our in-country volunteering and humanitarian aid. They may need to be addressed and redeveloped so that they take into consideration the nuances and the changes that online volunteering will bring. And finally, one of the key things that I think is super important when we're talking about online volunteering, as Colette said, it's a complementary aspect of humanitarian aid. The European Union is needs-based. The European Union works very closely with local and national governments in the Global South and the recipient countries. And we need to ensure that they are also aware of and they buy into online volunteering as an add-on, as an added value to the work they're doing in their countries to support and progress their countries. So always online volunteering will need to be needs-based from the Global South. It needs highly committed champions. It should have clearly defined objectives, clear and regular communication with volunteers, have a results-based monitoring and learning process, and have engagement and buy-in from the recipient, local and national governments in the countries. So on that note, I'd like to thank you very much on behalf of Vivid T, the consortium that commissioned this, Viatores Christi, the Irish volunteer sending agency and NGO that commissioned this work specifically, and I have been working with for the last few months. Abraham Worku from Ethiopia for all his advice and his support in presenting. Molly Egan, who couldn't make it today, but has been key to making sure this this research was done well, and myself, Sharron Kelliher. Thank you very much. Over to Conrad.
Thank you, Sharron. That was really excellent. I'm just wondering the screen. I've just got a full screen of view on it. I'm not sure whether. Yeah, that's better. Yeah. Excellent. So that was really interesting, Sharron, and I must say there's a lot of new thinking in this research, and I know you did say that it was limited in some respects, in the sense that you would have liked to have had more time and perhaps a lot more people involved in it, and also the funding is in it. So I guess this is something that could be expanded at a later point. Am I correct in saying that?
Oh, absolutely. This was a rapid research. So we did reach out to lots of networks. We reached out to disability organizations, older people, to other marginalized volunteers. We got some feedback, but not as much as I would like if we were talking about doing a deep dive into how this could work going forward. So yes, this was a rapid research, but very important to what we found and how we see things going forward, for sure.
Great. So Sharron, we've got a few questions coming in. I'm just looking at them for this. We're going to have the question and answer session now. I just want to mention just a technicality to the attendees. There was a comment that there's a lot of boxes within cameras that people can see on screen, which is preventing them from seeing the interpreter or the speakers. So I would suggest that attendees, if they wish to hide a camera, they can click on the 3 dots on the top right-hand corner of each camera, and you'll see a function there which can hide the camera. It may make it easier for attendees to see the speakers and the sign interpreter. Okay, so thank you, Sharron, Colette, Abraham and Shane. That was excellent. I've just got a few questions here for you. one question, I would be interested in hearing about case studies or examples of successful online disability inclusion volunteering. Who would like to take that question?
I'm happy to take it, because that's one of my recommendations in the report, is that we do look at this in a deeper way. We didn't do case studies for this because it was a rapid research. It was a very short, quick exploration into what online volunteering could do in humanitarian aid. If you were doing a full research piece, of course, definitely we would look at case studies, we would look at examples, both in the Global South and the Global North. We didn't have the opportunity to do that on this occasion, but certainly going forward, that would be a very interesting and important way to find out more about online volunteering. But for a rapid research, we wouldn't expect to see a case study.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. There's another interesting one here, possibly for one of you technical people. What are your thoughts in relation to technology barriers for carrying out online volunteering? So this will be interesting, for particularly from countries down the Global South, as you call it. What are your thoughts on these sort of barriers?
I don't know if anybody else wants to get involved in this.
Shane might have a view on that.
Yeah, well, I think the report highlights, Conrad, that really the technology shouldn't be a barrier. The issue is the ability and affordability. And so any program that has to be engaged with, or that is engaged in this area, needs to take into account that in order to balance up the in order to balance the development, that we need to have programs that are properly funded and resourced for the benefit of getting that technology in place. So, for example, in countries where there is there is broadband, there is facilities, but the challenge is that it's not affordable for most of our programs. So I would like to see it being seen as an equalizer in terms of our access. In the first instance. So it would need to be incorporated into development programs.
And I guess, yeah, go ahead, Sharron. Yeah.
If I can just say again, we didn't do any deep dive into the digital divide that exists between the Global North and the Global South. That is something that, again, would be interesting to explore. But certainly we know in many developing countries and many countries that we spoke to, the technology is there. There are big corporations working in these countries. Governments are running countries using technology. It really is about investment in the partners, investment in the areas to allow them to access the technology that exists. So many of the partners that we spoke to and many of the individuals we spoke to highlighted that technology can be an issue, but it shouldn't be a barrier to online volunteering. It shouldn't be a no.
It should be. There might be questions of, I guess, funding the actual recipients or the beneficiaries as well, to ensure that they've got the facilities in country, I guess. I've got another interesting question from Sandra here. Was there any mention of reciprocal online volunteering, global exchange that includes south to north and north to south online volunteering? I guess, does the technology allow more ability to sort of for exchange and reciprocal online volunteering?
I can answer that, or try to answer that, Conrad. Thank you, Sandra. That's a very interesting conversation. And Sandra, I can't tell you how many times reciprocal volunteering has come up in conversation while we were doing this research and looking at how it might work in an online context. And yes, it is something. It hasn't been really addressed in the research, and just giving the limitations of time and budget. But it is something very much there that has been brought out and onto the agenda. And we think of reciprocal volunteering in terms of, again, physical deployments where people travel, get on a plane and go. And thanks to Sandra and her colleagues in COLAB, we were introduced to reciprocal volunteering last year through the Norwegian state-funded agency NOREC, where groups of people with particular skill sets were recruited in a in a particular country, a partner country in the south, and came to Norway for a period of time, several years, and were treated as anybody else would be treated in that country in terms of social welfare, pension rights, all of that kind of thing. And likewise then, a group of volunteers from Norway would go to that country and engage in volunteering or more skills volunteering. So that is something definitely that's coming into the fore as well in terms of the future of volunteering and the future of work and skills exchanges. How that might work on an online platform, I think it has great potential. You know, if we, as I mentioned earlier, if we get the technology right, if we get the funding and the buy-in and the partnerships right on the ground, and we do the work, we design the programs, I can't see how that would not work. There's fantastic opportunities to share skills and learn from other countries how things are done, particularly if you're looking at the area of disability inclusion, particularly if you're looking at if we look at here in Ireland for as a case in point, looking at somewhere like Uganda and the area of refugees and integration into society, we can learn a lot from people in other countries in those contexts. So there is definitely room for that. It just needs a conversation to happen, interested people around the table. Again, going back to that virtual boardroom, having representatives from the various groups to drive program design, get buy-in from partners, get that buy-in from funders to fund the training, the hardware, the software. I can't see how it wouldn't work.
Okay, thanks, Colette. That's I know Ria has been trying to speak, get a question in there. I've got from Ria. When we talk about technology, it is also important to keep in mind that we make sure all technology we use is accessible for all. So not enough not enough people have the appliances and network, but to also use accessible platforms. So again, it's a kind of a comment on what you've been saying. And as Shane said earlier on, this shouldn't be an excuse for not doing this sort of volunteering online. I don't know whether any want to comment on that.
Yes, I'd like to just quickly comment. Thank you, Rhea. And I totally agree. In our report, we do talk specifically about disability technology and the need for assistive technology to be included in online volunteering going forward. It will be both a challenge and an opportunity for inclusion. And also the CRPD that talks about inclusion specifically defines that universal design shall not exclude assistive devices for particular groups of persons with disabilities where it's needed. So we need a better understanding of the assistive needs of persons with disabilities when they want to volunteer and how that will form a key part of inclusion. So absolutely the report speaks to assistive technologies and the need for that, for this to work properly. The report was about marginalized volunteers. It focused a lot on persons with disabilities, but it also does talk about older persons and their needs and other groups as well. And what I would recommend now, and what I would like to do a shout out actually, is that in solidarity with the people with disability, in solidarity with that community, that people could join the International Disability Alliance and International Disability and Development Campaign for COVID-19 that's calling for more public health inclusive communications around COVID-19. So we know we're getting a lot of information about COVID-19, but the International Disability Alliance and the International Disability and Development Accessibility Campaign say that we're not having enough support and we're not getting enough accessible information for people with disabilities. So I would ask everybody here now to participate in that and to ask for that and to participate with those groups to make sure that COVID-19 information right now, this moment, is more accessible for all. So absolutely, Ray, I agree with you completely.
Thanks, Sharon. Yeah, I mean, the questions on technology are coming in fast and furious. Kim says, regarding inclusivity, doesn't the cost of assistive tech make the hurdles even higher. Then we've another comment around Kenya. In Kenya, technology is there, but very expensive. We lack infrastructure. Many blind like me cannot access. Global North needs to come and support. So that's a really interesting couple of comments there. I don't know whether you want to sort of maybe respond in any way.
If I can, just I'm in no way an expert at all in terms of assistive technology or anything like that. But what I do know is that if we build our programs, do our baseline research when we are engaging with the online, online volunteering, and including and building and working to include people with persons with disabilities, that needs to be part of the program design. It needs to be presented to our funders. The other thing, I suppose, just to bring up something in relation to physical volunteering versus online volunteering is cost. For ourselves, in order for us to recruit, train and deploy and support a volunteer on a physical deployment, that costs quite a bit. Obviously they're a volunteer, they don't get paid a salary, they're just getting a basic living allowance. But in terms of flights, insurance, all of those things, that adds up. So if you are preparing a proposal for a funder, you're putting forward your case study, why this should be supported, I think it's important to highlight the cost savings and how that can be rediverted into purchasing and researching the appropriate assistive technology that's required by the key stakeholders in the project. Whether that's a person with a disability, and as been mentioned, somebody who needs assistive technology as a blind person, we instead look at how that can be redirected into investing in proper training, first of all, awareness building, purchasing of the proper technological equipment, hardware, software, all of that. As Shane mentioned earlier, I think that's a key point that Shane, our CEO of Viatores Christi, brought up, is that it should not be a barrier. We should be going to putting this argument to our funders, and it should not be a barrier.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelliher, for that. That's really interesting. Just another slightly different question from Rose. Very interesting look at online volunteering as complementing the physical presence and seeing opportunities to support humanitarian aid. Now, I know that that there were issues in the report around losing this physical face-to-face sort of experience. And I guess that's kind of what Rose may be alluding to. Do you want to comment on that, perhaps, Sharron?
Yeah, I mean, I have been a volunteer myself. Certainly, the face-to-face, the working in the country is all very valuable, both for the volunteer and for the people that I was working with, as an example. But that isn't to say that online volunteering can't be valuable and you can't build relationships. And the report sees, and people were very enthusiastic. The surveys speak to the fact that online volunteering could cause problems with regard to relationships, as Rose is saying. But many other people, when I spoke to them, and much of the literature says that actually it is possible, given the right time, investment and design of the program, to build relationships. Because of course, helping is more than just passing on skills. Helping is understanding culture, understanding context, being able to relate to each other, etc. That is all addressed in the report, and it is a challenge and an opportunity to level the playing field also, and for more voices to be coming from both sides of the equator. So certainly, I don't think online volunteering will replace in-country volunteering, but it has a lot of value and can support humanitarian aid in many, many innovative ways.
Great, Sharron. Just another question here from the Vivid team. Being this, I mean, we kind of touched on the speed of the report, but being this rapid research, what recommendations do you have for moving forward? What is the needed focus for further research? So I guess that's probably for you, Sharron, is it?
Yeah, I mean, That is my key. One of the I didn't want to sound disingenuous by putting it on the PowerPoint, but absolutely in the because the research itself is important. What we have done already is important, and I say that as just a player in the whole thing rather than anything else. But certainly, if we are serious about online volunteering, we need to be speaking more to the persons that we're talking about, to the persons with disabilities in the Global South. We need to be engaging much more fully with the persons with disabilities who might want to volunteer in the Global North, including older people, including people who would love to help, but just can't leave their families, to even without COVID-19, who can't leave their families, can't afford to, long-term unemployed, all of those people, they can't leave. I was very privileged to be able to spend a year out of my life to go volunteering. I know many people who can't do that. So absolutely, this was a very rapid piece. We did reach out to those groups and networks. We did speak to some people from those groups and networks, but a lot more engagement needs to be made with those groups and networks, and also with the donors. Certainly 100%, any other research needs to be engaging with the donors to hear what they have to say, because we know humanitarian aid is reliant on their support. Any of the organizations on this webinar right now are reliant on their support to supply the support and help for each other, both Global North and Global South. So I would be recommending much, much more engagement, a deeper dive into all of this going forward. That needs funding in itself.
Great, Sharron, that's fantastic. I think we're just on the button now, 11 o'clock. So I want to thank all the speakers for their contributions, an excellent report, and I hope people read through this in detail. There's a lot of meaty sort of findings in there, and I think now it's time for a 15-minute break. So please come back at 11:15, where we'll be talking with the CEO of Viatores on the future of international volunteering. Thank you very much.
Conrad, can I just say that the questions that are being put in the box that haven't been answered, we can try and get to them at the end of the day.
That's a good.
So don't. Sorry for putting them in there, and you can get to them, but there are some really good questions in there.
Yes, that's a good idea. Yeah. So we're on time now, so let's take a break for 15 minutes, and I hope to see you all again at 11:15. Thank you very much.